Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here, and of course we are playing Black Ice for Hearts of Iron 4, and the reason I say it is because it is a major conversion of the basic. And hello, Kronos. Good to have you here. And we are pushing in now. I'm not going to go over all of my, and some of them are significant complaints about the mod, and just basically you could say that, you know, no one's ever going to 100% agree on anything, obviously. But the bottom line is I am generally satisfied with their direction. Whether the things that I think should be modified, whether they'll do them, or whether it's worth doing a mod for it, or is it maybe just something we put up with and live with things that I don't like. But generally speaking, this playthrough has gotten me to the point of wanting to play Black Ice again, wanting to play it, not just we're just taking a quick look at the world situation here. I guess you guys can interpret what you're seeing. You know, I mean, like this is, like I said, I'm not going to do a big deal about it, but, well, can we come down to here? Yes, okay, good. This is a minor thing. And Admiral Teague, hail. Hail, hail. Seems to be in... Yeah, we do have some possibilities here, but... Well, we can talk about that here. But a minor thing is should we have Comp Group A Nord here that showed up here? Well, historically, this is and we can look at the template. This is what becomes a mountain division, though it's, we can see here, it is not particularly mountain troops here. And it definitely had some non-Germans in it. Now there is Nordland and some other SS units. A bunch of those people were Norwegians and Danes that had been, you know, occupied by Germany, but also there were volunteers, particularly from Sweden, that hadn't been occupied. So if we're looking at a, this playthrough, not every play, and this is, again, to those that are new around here, I want a plausibly realistic playthrough, not a forced must-do exactly World War II and just see if Germany could get better die rolls this time and win. Meaning, there is a good reasons, and you can look at it, to not invade Norway and Denmark. When they start the invasion of Norway and Denmark, and definitely the planning stages, they hadn't started the invasion of France. So they're looking at, and you gotta try to, as much as you can when you examine history, is try to look at it from, out other people's windows, not just out your window. Well, Germany was limited from world trade by the British fleet, which through most of World War I sat up here. And you can go, okay, they could trade into the Russians were their enemies, but Germany did, like in World War II, did dominate the Baltic. So yeah, they could, and Russia, Finland was part of Russia at the time, so they could trade up to Sweden or something. But that was about it. So there was no overseas trade for Germany. They did make at least one submarine made the journey, and I think they started to make, or U-boat, if I want to call it that. I think they did start to make a few more, but I think they completed them as military submarines. They took one submarine, removed all weapons from it, Germany, during World War I, and it made it from Germany to, I believe it was New York, but maybe it was Boston. I'm not sure, but I believe it was New York. And it was unarmed, and it was designated as a merchant vessel. And that's basically what it, and it was, for the one journey, it was very much propaganda, and the sailors got off. They went around, because the U.S. was neutral at the time, went around New York City and whatnot as neutral civilian sailors. And the concept was for the thought, not for large industrial, either resources or, produced goods that the Allies were just, getting in huge amounts. It was to try to bring in certain critical resources that even a small trickle would be very useful, but just things sort of went even a little more bad. So they completed the few submarines that they were sort of big submarines for the time. And it was a journey. And I remember reading an article about it, because they published this stuff of how they were avoiding British ships and whatnot, and getting across the Atlantic and then getting back. So that is the big, long picture, is they're worried about a long war with France down here and Britain keeping them from trade. Short term was Britain violating Norwegian neutrality, and Germany was, or whether it was German, civilian vessels. And the concept is, with a civilian vessel in other, in national waters, not in international waters, but in national waters, moving along within the 12-mile limit, it shouldn't be touched. If Norway is neutral, both a British and a German civilian vessel should be able to move through Norwegian water. Now, not military vessels, because that would then require the permission of Norway. And if Norway is giving permission, that would then make them no longer neutral. Now, you still, even with that, could move in and out of neutral ports, but there was, I don't remember all the details, but like either a 24 or 48-hour window that, and this is what you see with the Graf Spee, which goes in and out of Buenos Aires and whatnot down here off the River Plate, is that you could go in, and this goes back to the age of sail, go into a neutral port, get food, water, generally for, especially the, old sailing vessels, wood, because you needed wood on a wooden vessel to cook your food. And a lot of food was, I'm not going to go into all this stuff, but you needed to boil it. Salted beef, salted pork, you needed to boil it to get the salt out of it. So you can't just eat most of it cold. You needed to cook. So, and then later, of course, getting coal or wood for a coal, a solid burning steam engine, or need oil for oil burning steam engines, or as diesel engines were coming about leading up to World War II, that the Germans used fairly extensively, compared more than the Americans. Coming in, getting fuel, but then leaving. You got to stay. And then there was, I think, something like a 12-hour rule that if there was, say, a British ship in port and a military vessel, and a German vessel shows up, and then if that British ship leaves, I think it was something, and if you want to know the rules, go look them up, but it was something, just giving you the concepts, something like 12 hours, that the one, once one declares that it's leaving, it has a 12-hour head start that it can get out. So the other one can't just immediately go and chase it and start shooting at it once it leaves national waters. So a certain amount of time. And so, which would extend how long you could stay, or would extend your stay for the other combatant in there, because that would restart the clock over. But you couldn't, legally, you couldn't cruise within the 12-mile limit to avoid contact or whatever. And this is, we'll get to here on Norway in just a moment, what happened. You could only, come out here and then go into port and then come out in a relatively efficient path. And just because this did happen in World War II down here. And the British respected, and the Germans respected, Lugians respected the limits, and this is why once his time's up, he's asking permission from Hitler to allow him to stay in Buenos Aires, which then, if they stay, that ship gets to be interred, which basically is either sort of confiscated by, which in this case would be the Argentine officials, or disabled from sailing or steaming by the Argentine officials, which might be damaging the ship, like taking the propellers off or something, or it might just be emptying it of fuel. And the Graf Spee was a huge diesel engine, so just pump all the diesel fuel out of it and monitor, and then maybe allow the German sailors to live on board the ship, or they would either be controlled and lived on board the ship, or put into they're not technically prisoners of war, but internment camps would be the term, that then they could, because we can look at some of the one of the there were, I believe, I'm jumping around here. I hope this is interesting. Hello, Felipe and Frog Eyes. Going to say hi. There were two Polish divisions that were equipped by France before, after Poland falls. Most of the men in the division are Polish soldiers that made it out mostly through Romania, but trickled other various sources out, as well as just Poles in exile that joined up. And they were equipped and sort of organized as French infantry divisions. If I remember correctly, one of them escapes out to Britain. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was part of Dunkirk. I think it was later, Cherbourg or some later evacuation. The other one, because where it was stationed was down in here, they did not want to surrender to Germany for multiple reasons, but possibly very bad things happening to them. They escape down to Switzerland and get interred for the war, and just sit the war out in Switzerland. Now, and again, they're in camps behind barbed wire, but everybody, they do deals with like the government to go like, hey, yeah, we're gonna live in the camp here. You're gonna provide us with food, yeah. Hey, can we have like a division? Can we have like 50 people that leave the camp every day? And then you get passes, and so they would check, and make sure you come back before other people get to leave, because they're not prisoners of war and they're not trying to escape, and they would keep checking so if too many of them disappeared, they would stop the program. So it's something about between on your honor and verifying. And the Germans could, again, they did send monitors to these things in Switzerland. The Germans could sort of monitor to see that the camp isn't just emptying out, because there were daily, well, I don't know if daily, but there were at least weekly flights between Switzerland and like Spain and Switzerland and Britain that were neutral and marked with these big red flags with white crosses in them and whatnot to fly over, and scheduled at times that everybody knew when they were flying, so don't shoot us down, so that that everybody knew, so they could theoretically be trickling out. But the Germans were monitoring to make sure that at least not too many were getting out. So these kind of internment camps weren't quite prisoner of war camps. These weren't the bad internment camps. And so, the soldiers or sailors would just be interred for the duration of the war, unless there was, and some wars they've had them in exchange protocols, like, oh, hey, yeah, we can let 500 of your prisoners go, because we'll let 500 of our prisoners, that we have of you go, and swap that back and forth. So unless there was a swap or whatever, they didn't do that in World War II, but they did that in other wars. Quite common, actually. So, so you could go into national waters, but Britain, and there is the concept of hot pursuit, in that if you're out here within international law, including during wartime, if you're out here, beyond the 12-mile limit in say a German vessel, and a British vessel comes in here, and the German vessel goes into Norwegian waters, the British vessel can follow and keep attacking. They're not supposed to endanger any local. We lost a convoy there. Any local Norwegian shipping or anything or whatever. So, but Britain, there was a vessel that was German flagged, that was, I think, ostensibly unarmed and I don't know whether you call it a civilian or military. And it had, if I'm remembering all this correctly, it had a bunch of British prisoners on board. And I say it that way as I think these are crewmen that one of the surface raiders had, captured the vessel and taken the, sailors off of it. We're moving along Norwegian waters to come back in here. Britain violates, and so this is gray area at best on both sides, but it comes in there, and that's one of the triggers that Germany uses to go into Norway. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with why they invaded Norway. I do know that Germany is worried about shipments of steel coming out of Sweden that are being shipped through Narvik during the long winters out here that would come out through this way. But I think the primary reason is try to get freedom of the seas. Is that Germany thinks with its air power, naval power, it can control the Skagerrak down here, this sort of area. And then with trains, link up to these ports here. There really is not a train connection up to Narvik as far as I know. But then to be able to, and Germany did have a program of blockade runners. That very interesting stuff if you want to read about it. As well, base unarmed ships that were trying to look like other nations' vessels that would go out and get stuff. But to the idea is to have some freedom of navigation as well as be able to slip out surface combat ships without being, and possibly submarines without being intercepted. I think that's the main reason. Now, in hindsight, we see France collapsing very, very fast and opening up this bit of the coast. Now, not that this isn't still useful because it's more area. And definitely if we're talking Britain doing Lend-Lease, which happens later, doing Lend-Lease to Russia, having these bases up here to intercept it is quite useful, actually. But you do get the U-boat threat, because trying to get U-boats through here, this is, I'm sure you can get them through. But this is a much better area of, being able to contain them than coming out to here. And plus it makes the range, of needing to be at sea much longer. And this is, do realize that this is a flat map. I mean, you already know that. These distances here are relatively a lot closer because somewhere north of here, it all, comes together. So coming out of, it's not really this long compared to this long. It's more like this long versus this long to get all the way over around here, up there. So, but if you had to come up here and then over and around, it's a lot longer. So, but this is a plausible historic. This isn't Nazi Germany not being Nazi Germany. This is just Nazi Germany not going north, which is quite reasonable, even if, because there's no, other than the perceived easiness of taking of these, Denmark, they fight less than a few hours. And the resistance may even not be considered authorized by the government. Norway collapses rather quickly. It sort of takes a bit to get it all done. But beyond that, there's no point that they couldn't try to defeat France, and then when that failed, then push into Norway. And in fact, and Germany does have the reserves. In fact, by pushing into France and making this a contested area, well, that's what ultimately, I would say is why the British and French withdraw from their defense of Norway, is that they're losing down here badly, and they know they can't also hold up here, so they withdraw. So if they have a lot of their forces occupied down here, they're not going to be able to effectively defend Norway. So you could always go do that later. And obviously we did conquer France and now have ports to use here. So we don't need Norway. And the only reason I'm losing ships here is because I can't fully control what the game does. I have some better controls than Hearts of Iron 3, meaning I can block off certain sea sections, sea areas, sea regions, whatever you want to call them. But in Hearts of Iron 3, I could also turn it over from auto to manually doing these supply runs and then just not have them. So for some reason, it is feeling like instead of moving supplies via railway, it wants to do it through the sea. And I can't turn it off. I can absolutely forbid them to go through certain zones, but then other things that I might want to go through here won't, but maybe I should still. Oh, let's try this. That may turn it off. So yeah, so this is a historically plausible, in my opinion, playthrough. The idea of conf group in Nord existing is not a bad idea, and whether you would have what is rather diplomatically been anti-German but also at war with the Soviet Union, Finland, that's another questionable thing, but possible. But it wouldn't appear, this unit wouldn't appear up here and you have to withdraw it. It would just be recruited down here. So yeah, I know this is a long time and a lot of history that I hope is interesting, but I'm pleased with their direction and where they're going with the mod. And from everything from what I'm hearing about their new DLC that I don't know if it's come out or coming out soon, that Paradox is releasing, dealing with Scandinavia, I hear it's pretty bad history-wise, more fantasy than history. So I'm not pleased at what Paradox is doing. Let me take a look at the chat here and see what good things everybody's saying. Okay, if you're going to come to America, you want to go to New York. Okay, I think that they're spotted. You want to go to New York City? They spotted and sank more than a couple of U-boats. Longshore. Yeah, well, I know definitely during World War II they did. Okay, BICE dropped new industry rework for the test version. Okay, good to know. Had a quick look and wow, going to be fun learning a new system. Can't wait. Both good. I hope good and more to learn. This again, to those who this playthrough is purely for me an evaluation playthrough, and I'm evaluating it with you, and so because I could have made it this far into the game in 2 weeks of just playing on my own, but I wanted to stream it for you guys and interact with you while evaluating it. So I'm evaluating it as good. Now I've got to try to, and that was then, do I spend my own time off stream just playing it to learn it well enough so I'm not trying to figure out the next thing while playing it on stream. Not necessarily become the expert on the mod or whatever, but you become familiar with it would be a good term. Okay, yes. Hi, Felipe. Germany modern industry is dying. Germany economy too. I don't know that modern industry in Germany is dying. Germany has made some very poor choices and is realizing it. I think Germany is waking up to those poor choices, and I think is reevaluating things. I'll ask that question to one of my German friends who very much works in German industry. I don't want to go into who or more detail than that right at the moment. Not that it's any particular secret, just his story to tell and not my story to tell. I'll ask him that question if he thinks German industry is dying. He definitely has some gripes about it. I know that. Think Europe can survive without Germany? Yes, it can. I think modern German industry become dependent, or modern Germany become dependent on industry. Well, there is definitely the concept that, and this has been for many years, is that the German goal was to get a good job and own a Mercedes. That was sort of like the goal in Germany. You know, have a home. And I say home because if you're very urban, you very much may be an apartment. You know, owning or whatever, not just a cheap apartment, but a nice thing, or a bit more, you know, suburban or rural and own a house, but own a Mercedes, and which is sort of a slam by other Europeans who don't seem to aspire to own automobiles. They aspire to use public transit, either buses or trains and other things, where the Germans want to drive around, which I support Germany's idea of. Now, the modern German industry is not well, the economy is dying. Well, I don't know that it's not well and the economy is dying. I do know that Germany has been pushing renewable energy, which by that they basically mean wind and solar. Solar cells don't last long. I'm going to throw out a number of years, but somewhere between 10 and 20 years is my understanding solar cells last. But I'm damn sure they don't really last like 60, 70 years. So the solar panels need to be replaced. Where the Boulder Dam, or also known as Hoover Dam, both names are correct, down here that was built back in the 1930s, is still very much generating electricity. Yeah, but green, and I call them eco-mentalists. Yes, hello, Arno, my friend. Don't like damming rivers because it changes the ecosystem. Well, of course it does. It creates a lake. And they just hate any sort of man influence changed on the environment, whether you think it's good or bad. Or you know what? Another problem we have had, we don't have a drought anymore in California, and we have, at least currently, more water than we know what to do with. And the idea of letting, in certain cases, water overflow the dams to keep them from filling up too much. But in the last 10 years, the California Environmental Protection Agency, or whatever the hell it's called, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but has forbidden anybody to make just about any dams in California. So if you have land, whether it could be ranch land, farmland, just land, and there's any sort of idea of a flowing stream, or even seasonal streams, they have been forbidding them from making dams on environmental grounds of protecting this, that, or some other thing. Most would not be big enough to generate electricity in any meaningful amount. I'm sure you could have some little generator that spins and something, but they would have been enough to capture some of the considerable rainfall that happens around here that then fairly quickly flows to the sea, or whatnot, that you could have captured around. And just because of some supposed endangered something or other, or whatever their excuses are, they've been forbidding creating any new damming, any new dams around here, big, large or small. So, and that, you know, I don't know if there's many good places to dam. There may be some great places to dam here. I don't know, to generate electricity. And so power has been a real problem with Germany, and the lack of power really does hurt your industry. Now, I do know that they've been tearing down windmills in Germany to, well, taking them down would be the appropriate term, and that are perfectly functional and actually functioning quite well. But they're doing some big open pit coal mining to keep their power grid functioning. I think they're just going to end up moving these windmills. Not that they're going to be trashed or destroyed or anything like that. They're just taking them down and going to have to find, I don't know if nearby or just literally the other side of Germany, just find a new location for them. But the Germans are heading towards a cliff. They have ample ability to steer away from the cliff at this point. We will see. Yes, I need power. Hello, Arno, over on YouTube. So yes. Right. Okay. So so I know all that to that. I'm liking this mod. I'm going to learn this mod better and continue playing it. Okay. Now the Battle of Narva. I don't know why it's spelled with a W there, but various spellings around Europe. Was a very costly, bloody battle for both sides. Germany was pushing this way. The Soviets defending this way. This is one reason I pushed up this side, is to keep, you'll notice they did sort of fortify it here with river crossing penalties. It would not have been pretty to come out here, but I think we will push here now, and we'll get ready to push out once we get that going. These guys are pushing north here. Now we are here. We'd like to take Leningrad. These guys are going north. These guys are going north. Now, it was mentioned earlier that there is, I think this is where they were talking about a potential for a very large pocket here. And it is a potential. Now, this is mirroring history. We're late. Now, I invaded the Soviet Union, about 60 days late. Again, one of my very big complaints is these national focuses and the days for completion. And I did choose prepare for long winter, which had a long time to prepare for it, and then other things that delayed my start, and even delayed it from the historical start. And the historical start was late because of Germany invading Yugoslavia and then coming into Greece. You know, Germany makes it to somewhere around here. I don't know exactly on this map, but somewhere around here. Now, the German invasion suffered from multiple problems. One of the problems was just simply wear and tear on equipment, and particularly motor vehicles, and very much particularly tanks. And Germans are great record keepers. They've also destroyed a lot of their records from World War II for various reasons, as well as records get destroyed in bombings and big, firestorms and whatnot, as well as being lost because a lot of the records may have been at the divisional headquarters, and that division gets overrun by the Soviets at some point, or the Allies if it's some other place. So we don't have all the records, but we do have a lot of records. I think a minority of the records, but that's still a lot of records. And you can look at, say, pick a tank division, and we can come down here. I'll scroll a little bit faster here. And right now, this one has 31 Panzer IICs, which will still definitely be used in 1941 as Germany as mainline tanks, if you will. This has 9 Panzer 1Bs. They were still around a bit, mostly being phased out or into other uses. Okay, we have 40 Panzer IIIFs. Okay, so that's very good. And we have 40 Panzer IVs. That for a November 1941 German tank division to be fully up on equipment would have been shocking. Shocking. They would probably, and I'm just going to throw out a number here, probably be at 1/3 of their strength. That does not mean that they've had 1/3 or 2/3 losses at this point. I remember years ago reading an article about this, and somebody did look at, I don't know what tank division, but one of the tank divisions that pushed in there, that they had access to their like daily records, and they have daily returns or weekly returns. I don't know whether it was weekly or daily, that specified how many tanks that division had at any given time that were operational. And that's the key term, operational. And so a tank division that makes it this far, and figuring they started back here at East Prussia or somewhere, that has made it this far, very well may have literally 1/3 of its tanks spread out from somewhere back in here up to here in various field repair depots being fixed, waiting for spare replacement parts or whatever. Some of this is combat damage. Somebody shot and hit the front sprocket here and damaged it. So and also hit it and damaged and tweaked the axle, and maybe they even need to get out and replace the transmission because in that impact it hurt that. But hey, the tank crew's fine. The rest of the tank is fine. The hole hasn't been penetrated. It's good to go, except for it's waiting for its part. Or maybe, hey, somebody's poked a few holes in it, maybe killing a crewman or two. But otherwise, it's fine. They're waiting to patch up, cut out and place in another piece of armor or something. But the engine's fine and it could drive. So some of it is combat. Some of it is just driving it across this far in Russia. These vehicles were not made to do that. They were made to be moved on tank carriers, big trucks, either on the smaller ones on the back of trucks, bigger tanks, Panzer IIIs and IVs, on a trailer, a low boy type trailer, for any great distance. But they're unable to do that for most of the trip. Now, if they're bringing up some of these tanks from some depot and they can source trucks as they're moving around and find them, yes, they would be moving them on the tank carriers if they can get the trucks with the thing and get them up there. But as you're advancing day by day by day, they're not doing that because each individual movement is not. Yeah, we're not on Kick or Rumble today, Arno. Just doing the other three services. Thanks for checking, though. So, yes, I'm normally on Rumble and Kick as well. Rumble definitely, but just started late today. So, yeah, so it wasn't all... So, maybe by this point... and so losses from combat could be, catastrophic kills. You definitely see pictures that are, tanks blown apart, major hull elements warped. They're done for as any sort of vehicle. You scrap them. Maybe you might find road wheels or other bits and pieces to take off to reuse. The rest just go back into the scrap heap and get recycled. Other tank damage, and we can definitely see, and this is where we have better, and mostly British sources, we have better sources on records because the British were capturing German tanks, putting them into, or Italian in a few cases, unlucky Australians, capturing, German tanks, using them, the Germans capturing them back, using them, being knocked out, penetrating their hull, killing some of the crew, or maybe just breaking down from mechanical failures and the back and forth on the battlefield. They just get abandoned. So we definitely know both sides are using the... one thing that Admiral Teague might be interested in, Rommel's headquarters unit did have a few German vehicles in it, but it had two large trucks that they captured from the British that I think the British were using them as radio trucks, big sort of trucks with big cabs on the back, cabins on the back that were command trucks. But all of his escort fighting vehicles, and he had escort, as part of his command headquarters, he had a combat unit that was in theory a protection for the headquarters as it's moving around, but in actuality it was also sort of a quick fire brigade to plug up an enemy breakthrough, or to use it where he saw a vulnerable spot to attack. But it was basically, the fighting vehicles were all made up of captured equipment. And so instead of taking away some tanks or whatever from his other units, when they were capturing stuff and getting it back into use, they were, marking it up with German crosses and whatnot, repainting it maybe, but everybody's using basically the same color of tan, so that didn't sort of matter. More just the markings on it, and putting them back into service against the British. And this was during the British, campaign into the east here, not so much Tunisia. But yeah, his command HQ were captured vehicles of armored fighting vehicles of various sorts, armored cars and whatnot, with German crews in them. So whether he would be doing the same on the Eastern Front. So yeah, we do know that there's back and forth with equipment and how much it's going on. So this would be a remarkably well-equipped division here. Supplies were not running that well, keeping everything equipped. And Germany definitely used things like French and Belgian uniforms, definitely used all that stuff, but not. And so this is represented in the mechanic here of this game, in Polish uniforms, of captured equipment. Well, they did not use this for German infantry divisions. What they did do, and not taking uniforms off prisoners. These were like overrunning warehouses, whether forward field depot warehouses or big warehouses back in, wherever. And they literally would have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of uniforms, boots and whatnot. What particularly they would do is re-dye these things, maybe gray, but often blue, and give them over to various internal security units. So whether units like these guys here, sometimes they might be German manned units, sometimes they would be various collaborators. Now, so you wouldn't have so much the field blouses, you would have the other stuff, but they wouldn't, by the time they get, they're not just removing the Polish badges, they would be re-dyed and used. Now this here is just, and if I were playing at greater detail, let's see, I normally don't deal with this. They've changed the no air wings. We want to keep that unmotorized. Because it should not have a Gewehr 41, a semi-auto rifle that should have good combat equipment. It should have captured rifle, generic whatever. Fuel, supplies, demand. That's it. Oh, I probably shouldn't spend the time looking here now, but there at least was a setting for priority of equipment here. And I should lower these priorities down, so that especially have the new equipment out to the better stuff out to the front lines. I observe you haven't put Panzer IIIs into production, the M variant. Okay, well, on that, let's see. We currently come to here. We do not have an M variant here, which is a 42. We don't yet have the tech researched 50 millimeter L60 gun. We do not have improved tank radios, and we do not have Schutzen or smoke dischargers that you have to have research to unlock. I don't think, because there isn't arrows, I don't think you have to, but this here, we need improved tank radios, which I do believe, let's come, click here. Yeah, improve. We are researching the improved tank radios, and this is one thing. Like I say, this is again my sort of evaluation of the mod. I'll need to learn it to know that if I want to have the J model available in 41, make sure that I research this radio. I have not prioritized this as a a thing yet, and I need to learn. That's what I say. Talk about is you need to learn this mod, and it will take a few playthroughs. So all of these are waiting for improved radios, except for this one is the F Aztec F chassis. So oh, that's just simply this doesn't disappear. Let's simply research this thing here. And we could get that 81 days. Now, do I even bother with this? Do I even care about an improved Panzer II, or just keep producing my earlier Panzer IIs until I decide to stop producing Panzer IIs and research other things? So, yeah. And one of the reasons I'm so far ahead here is because, again, with this mod, it's coming through this one, which only allows me these two trees to research from. So it was just what to research it on. So that's why we're doing that. Okay, so now historically, Leopard is great light tank. Yes, it is a great light tank. It the only, well, one, it is overly complicated to build, and what he is speaking of, well, let's come over here maybe to, well, no, maybe here, I don't know. Let's clicking all the wrong things here. He's talking about this thing here. It's a fairly complicated vehicle to build. It has interleaved road wheels, which are great for ride smooth characteristics, but if you'll notice, basically no modern tank uses them. They all use these kinds of road wheels. The problem is that they work great until they don't. And two things with don't. One, you get stuff stuck in them, mud or whatever else, because they're interleaved, so they're harder to clean, harder to get stuff unstuck from them. And two, to get at this wheel here, you have to take off both these two outer wheels to get at that wheel behind there. So it's more of a maintenance headache, where to get at this wheel, you just get at this wheel. So I don't know of any modern system that uses it. It's a great light vehicle. The other problem with it historically, and there's all other detailed complications to make, is it has a 20 millimeter gun on it. There was talk of coming, and I know you're coming down here to this one here eventually, the 50 millimeter here, which is basically, it depends on when you talk about this tank, because this tank was never made. So you say great. Well, they made about 100 of these or versions there. Yeah, the Loesch here. But if you are there was definitely using this chassis with, in essence, basically this turret, which is the same turret that's used on the Puma with the 50mm gun, but it also has interleaved road wheels. And then they sort of paper drew up what they might do in like 46 or 47, then is a bit more of a fantasy one. So we don't really know of that Leopard. Or were you speaking of the modern Leopards? Maybe my head's just in World War II and you were talking. Oh, I said light tank. So you're talking about here. So the Loesch or Lynx, it's just German for the cat, and then the Leopard with the 50mm, and whether that would have simply been the earlier tank hull with the turret that they did make for the Puma, that would have been very viable. Whether they went and did all the other production work, I don't know. But that never materialized. So I don't have a greatness for that. So they had the same debate. They, in pushing east, I think it was about 10 days that the German army stops while the generals debate. Hitler and the generals together debate. There is forming a big pocket here. And what some of them wanted to do was close this big pocket to get a big haul, million plus prisoners and get all the equipment. Some of it they would end up reusing, others they would, and they definitely did go around battlefields and pick up tanks and artillery pieces that were wrecks, and to recycle the steel, just to recycle the steel and any other recyclable components there. They did that, as well as captured equipment. And that's what they ended up doing, but they also delayed to debate this. Now, the delay to debate it, as one of my friends who definitely looked into this many years ago, he thinks that was really stupid. But I don't know, because that 10-day or so delay allows, like we said, that this division is incredibly well equipped, and no division that's put, if there was a Panzer division sitting back in Germany training up, that might be that well equipped, but there was no division on the front lines, Panzer or otherwise, that well equipped at this stage in the campaign. It allows them some pause to resupply, make sure you have enough fuel and bullets and food and that kind of stuff, as well as catch up your broken down and equipment to get it back working, to get replacement equipment. So there is an element of pausing to catch your breath in this whole thing. But the debate is do we push for Moscow or do we do the big pocket? They chose the pocket. And so it is the combination of the time for the debate and then the time to close the pocket. So units from Army Group Center, which is the one that's pushing towards Moscow, and Army Group South, which is pushing into Ukraine, they come here and close around this kind of thing. Now, had they not done that, some of those Soviet units and personnel and equipment would have fallen back. Some of it wouldn't, just because Stalin's, no step back orders kinds of things, and they would have eventually been surrounded and taken out anyways. And there were units that were disobeying, and falling back, and that's why some people were being shot and other fun things like that. So it delays taking Moscow. Now, Moscow is being fortified at this time, as Germans are approaching. Plus just simply fighting in the city fighting in Moscow. So there could be a massive fight in Moscow. So if you rush to Moscow and you're defeated at the gates of Moscow, and a good chunk of the forces here escape out to fight another day, We could say militarily it would be a stupid move to fixate and move on Moscow. But one of my maxims that I learned, and I keep saying, and I know many of you who've been around heard me say this before: warfare is a political act. Politics is perception, okay? Those things are true, just simply true. So, if German troops or German tanks, and in significant numbers, not just 10 of them, but 2 or 3 divisions worth, and they're effective combat fighting force, and they're coming towards Moscow, are the soldiers going to fight? Are there going to be like when the Soviets are pushing into Berlin, you find lots and lots of German soldiers hung up on street lamps? That's because the SS were running around hanging soldiers that they thought were, whether they thought were or just getting off on hanging soldiers, or hang one and hope the other 100 will fight harder next time, continue to fight or whatever. Whatever your reasoning is, they were hanging all kinds of soldiers. Some were maybe very much trying to escape, but others, I think they were just hanging for the fun of it. Would the NKVD be trying to hang Soviet soldiers to try to motivate them to fight? Or would the NKVD be on trains with all their files and other stuff heading out to Gorky? Would they, Berlin here with the Allies pushing in, in this side, there isn't, there is talk, and there was sort of a Alpine redoubt being built, but long term, there really isn't anybody being even halfway rational isn't going to go, oh, well, we just fall back and we can continue our war. Well, you could look at falling back to Gorky, or you can look at falling back to however you pronounce that, and you're not even yet at the Urals, and you can continue your war. So they very well may have collapsed at Moscow. We just don't know. My contention is we just don't know. Now, if you take Moscow and you look at that. Now, it isn't quite, an actual railway map isn't quite that. But look at that. If you want to get something from up here, at a factory up here, and let's say, let's say there's a steel making factory up here at Yaroslav, and Tula is a major Soviet or Russian, it goes back to the Russian Empire, arms manufacturing city, which never gets taken by the Germans. They don't take Tula. Down here. It's down here. And so to get the steel from here, you got to go through Moscow, basically. Now, there is sort of a bit of a ring around Moscow of railways connections, but it gets, like you can see here, which I love the way this new thing is. There are some lines that are thinner that are not well built up. So some of the lines do connect around, but the rail traffic they can handle is much smaller. So to get steel from here, no problem. But if you take Moscow, to get steel from here, you've got to go over here, back here, around, down here, up over here. Oh, well, we got to get to Tula. Well, maybe do we still hold here? Maybe there's realistically a more direct route. But so trains that take longer to get there. But also if you have new unit raised here, given tanks here in Gorky or whatever, and artillery pieces here, and you want to get them down to here, no problem. They go through Moscow. But if Moscow's gone, well, what's the route? How are they getting here? Moscow is such a major rail hub for the Soviet Union for strategic movement of either resources, finished goods, artillery pieces, tanks, whatever, and units moving around. and also moving food around to the needy populations from where it's grown to where it's going to be eaten. That had you taken Moscow, you might just have a collapse of the Soviet Union. But even if you don't have a collapse of the Soviet Union, it is strategically hugely important. So with looking at this, I think if I can keep, and I'm having a certain amount of trouble, and I'm sort of pushing here, I think I'm going to keep pushing in towards Moscow here, and in towards Orel here, and sort of just east here, and we are trying to hold out down here. So, and we're getting Romanian and Bulgarian and other forces here. We don't know how well they'll fight, but so I don't think I'm going to go to try to do this big pocket. Doesn't mean we won't end up pocketing. We have a lot of divisions here that just got done cleaning up a huge pocket in the Pripyat marshes. So we've already dealt with one major pocket. So I'm not that worried about missing another pocket if we move in. And hello, IKB, my good friend. How you doing? The station train staff have been on strike over government closing. Of ticket offices. How interesting, IKB. Sorry. Yeah, H35 is definitely that. Sentient jar of pickles. How are you doing? Because if tanks, I'm thinking of, are very bad. Makes government look silly. Lots of newspaper cartoons about ticket machines and online booking systems not being easy to use. Well, I'll tell you, I still, at the grocery store, I still go to the cash registers that have a person behind it and not yourself doing ones. Yeah, in the last year, maybe once I've, for some reason, used the auto checkout just because I was in enough hurry and a small enough thing. But normally I am willing to take my time and do it. And that is because I do not want people to lose their jobs, and and part of it is just literally jobs, part of it, but part of it is I do not want some of these grocery stores that I've seen in the news in which you need to sign up for on your app, and you literally don't interact with anyone. I know there's still a few people in the store, and they definitely, but I don't want that future. I want to be able to go up to a ticket window for a train and talk to somebody. Now, maybe, and so at every real station, and I don't know if you would have a stop that wasn't a station, maybe not every stop and pickup thing would necessarily, I mean, technically it might be a station, but we could argue on a few that maybe, what they used to call whistle stop, just something quickly stop, let a few people off, let a few people on and go. That might be automated, but I would say at least have one ticket window open, even if 90% of your customers are doing it through either automated machines or through your cell phones. I don't want to give up people. Thanks for garbage until the AM makes it. No. Oh, I'm doing fine. I got some extra sleep last night, so I'm doing fine now. I wasn't last night. Nothing serious, nothing big. I just wasn't feeling good. Okay. So we're pushing him up to there. They're moving up to there. They're pushing here. Okay, these guys are pushing here. Good. So let's see. Now, I want to, well, I think if we can, let's move across here. I see here just visually that there's a bridge here and thinking that's going to be easier to move. No, this bridge just is eye candy for rails. It does not help your units. You do not defend or attack better across a bridge. Okay. You, the 6th Panzer Division, attack there. You support that attack just to make sure it goes harder and faster. Since these guys are already moving, so they're not entrenched. Oh, wait a minute. We're actually moving into it. Oh, we're gonna attack them directly. I know it's 2-1, but we're gonna get those guys coming here. Yeah, I'm not gonna... French tanks are debatable. They were definitely the best... In 1940, they were the best World War I tanks out there. But do note that we were fighting in World War II by that point. Or they were fighting in World War II by that point. So, here there's only being defended by 2 divisions, 1 armored though. So we're pushing into there. You just move forward. You move forward. You move forward. You keep reorganizing. You keep moving up. I think these guys are doing well enough, so you guys start crossing the river. And you cross that way. Keep pushing up. Hey, Beam Slam. I have a card which goes for all trains and bus lines. Yeah. Maybe I'm just old. I do recognize that as a real possibility. Okay, Totenkopf, you attack that infantry division. You guys move up there. We're going to move rapidly there. And, you know, I get the idea of, you know, a universal pass thing, but, you know, having a card, whether you swap, whether it's a, a card that's, you know, you pay monthly to have unlimited use, or whether it's a, you know, something charged per use. Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the American in me that's confused by railroads. I don't know. Okay, United States protects the Dutch West Indies. Okay, this is interesting. At the request of the Dutch government, the United States of America has issued a proclamation stating that they consider the Dutch West Indies to be an integral part of their sphere of influence. They have vowed to protect the territory against any who might attack its rightful owners. Now, quite honestly, I haven't heard of this proclamation. They have a picture of FDR there. I know if there's this, if I was making this mod, if I was making a mod for this, that if I was doing that, it would have to be actually historically done. So I'm going to guess this was. Well, this is another reason why Japan attacks. Not that this gives justification. I want to be very, very clear here. No nation should be in any way forced to trade with another nation, or they're cutting off of, say, in Japan's case, excuse me, in case of Japan and the U.S., cutting off of selling of U.S. oil and steel, and maybe other things, to Japan, is in no way a equivalency or an act that would get, justify war, justify violence. No nation, well, we demand the right to trade with you. Yeah, and I do know the historical precedent of Admiral Perry showing up to Japan and sort of saying the same thing to them. But there is similarities, but there's also very difference, because we were sort of demanding trade, but not that they trade with us. What we were demanding there was sort of opening up trade, but it's complicated, and Japan, I would say, has the right not to trade with people, too, even though just because the U.S. did it doesn't make it right. But it wasn't an evil act either, because we didn't shoot anybody. If they ultimately just said fuck off in one way or another, we probably wouldn't have invaded or shot anybody, bombarded any city or whatever. It was really what happened, as far as I know, and I have read a few articles, though it's been years. Japan was just shocked, the average person here, because the only people were allowed, and it was a few times a year, the Dutch to show up at one little part of Nagasaki down here that they could show up and trade with. The rest of Japan, whether it be the elites of Japan or the rice paddy workers of Japan, were shocked at the technological advancements that America had, a nation that they probably never hardly heard of, because they've only been dealing with the Dutch and before that the Portuguese. I'm not saying whatever passed for Japanese diplomatic service didn't know of America or didn't know of Britain, but I'm talking like your middle and high level management in late feudal Japan. I don't know if they've even heard of it, the United States of America. And that just shocked the hell out of them, and they modernized at that point. But yes. And at this note here, so that does put, again, more why Japan felt they needed to attack America to secure when they were going to, once they decided to get the Dutch East Indies oil, that was the big goal. They might as well, if that was going to cause a war with the U.S. Again, it doesn't justify Japan's attack, not in the slightest, because they're attacking. And we can talk about the rightness or wrongness of colonialism generally, or Dutch colonialism in Indonesia. There are rights and wrongs on anything we can talk about, and there are definitely good things about colonialism. I generally think, on the whole, in most cases, it was good, but we can talk about that. But they were the sovereign owners of the Dutch East Indies. I would say these were basically before the Dutch showing up, a lot of bandit kingdoms raiding each other and butchering each other. And, we can talk about rights, and we can talk about, rights and wrongs of things and rights of people. But even if both sides are doing it, this tribe versus that tribe, do we put up with, oh, well, they have the right to have their little war. What's our place to stop it? Well, obviously, we're going to have to kill people to stop it. And they're both going to decide to fight us until they find out they can't win. Or if they think they keep winning, they're going to keep fighting. We look at Indonesian and, Indochina wars and whatnot. But butchery and mayhem, do we just allow it to go rampant part of the world? That is an interesting question, and that is sort of some of what the UN is supposed to be dealing with, and wars break out. And now, should it always be the U.S. going in everywhere? No, shouldn't always be the U.S. Not that they shouldn't do it some of the time, but, so yeah, colonialism is, to me, not a bad word. But whatever you want to say about it, colonialism, generally speaking, but whatever you want to say about it, we definitely see down here, this was Dutch territory, and not wanting wars to spread, the U.S. goes, hey, because remember at this point, Japan has already grabbed up French Indochina, from France. So they don't want to see the Dutch, who are occupied by the Germans, lose that, or the British lose, which aren't occupied and at war. So again, it's not a bad policy for America to have. It does definitely put us, as we can look back on a collision course for war with Japan. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, because at some point, and we can talk, we can talk about, and I know a lot of people, and I do have sympathy and I maybe agreement on some of their points of, non-interventionist America. Ron Paul, too extreme. If you're in his camp, I think you're too extreme on retreat from the world. But Lindsey Graham, if there's a conflict, the U.S. must join it, I think is too far on the other side. So, yeah, I'm somewhere, case by case, for U.S. involvement. Doesn't necessarily even mean primary involvement on intervention. But yeah, that does put us on a course for war with Japan. Now, Japan was also, committing major war crimes, not just having a war, but committing major war crimes while having a war with China. Whether you believe aggressive war should be a crime or not, I'm going to go no, because that's too blanket of a statement. Because war of aggression for conquest, and I know I was going to end this thing here, but on a philosophical thing, is war of aggression. And let's go here. We're going in to denazify the Ukraine. I use the word "the" in there is intentionally, not Ukraine. The current Moscow propaganda for the invasion of Ukraine. And it's very true that there are a significant number, I'm not saying a majority, because when we look at the Azov battalion and others, there are Nazis or neo-Nazis or others, because I don't know, other sort of pseudo-Nazis. They're definitely going on in Ukraine. Do we invade them just because there's Nazis? If we find Nazis in Florida, do we invade Florida? Even if the government, whatever, about those particular Nazis, just because there's a few Nazis there, do we invade Florida just to root out the Nazis in Florida? Right. And that's their justification. I am not in agreement with that justification. Yes, the Kiev government, as far as I could tell, is corrupt. I don't know whether it's more corrupt or less corrupt than the Moscow government. Without any real knowledge, I sort of figure they're both equally corrupt. So that doesn't make getting rid of a corrupt government somewhere a justification. But then I was focusing in here is whether, okay, what if tomorrow South Korea felt that they had located all of North Korea's nuclear weapons, know where they were, and had aircraft ready to go with, bunker penetrating bombs and missiles enough to knock out their nuclear arsenal. Let's just say that. And they believe the North Korean army, yeah, it has huge amounts of tanks, but they're mostly 1950s tanks, and they are mostly rust buckets, and the engines won't start on them, so it doesn't really matter that they're there. And for some reason, whether it's China's bogged down in a war with Taiwan, or bogged down in a war with Vietnam, or just somehow magically they believe China will not intervene in this conflict, South Korea wants to invade North Korea. Now, looking here, and we'll get to some of the chat here in just a moment, guys. Most of us in the West, shall we say, show me a government without corruption. Yes, IKB. And it's to a degree, degrees of corruption, but yeah. We would cheer on the South Korean aggression against North Korea because we see, although orderly, I would say, compared to collapsing states in other parts of the world, North Korea is a very, very oppressive place. You see photos of North Korean soldiers, and there's some famous ones, standing next to American soldiers and South Korean soldiers. And both of the American and South Korean soldiers are towering over the North Koreans. And again, that shows you diet is effective. Europeans, and when I was living in Europe back in the 90s, I don't know if it's changed considerably. There were a few Europeans as tall as me. I'm, over 6'1", not quite 6'2". So 6'2" in my, shoes with a little bit of heel on them, not even a full inch of heel, but I was much larger than most people in Britain that I was around by multiple inches, and stood out in the crowd for my height, but not like a NBA star or somebody would stick out. And I'm genetically, as far as I know, from the people of Britain, so there is no genetic differencing between me and them, and I'm, so I am genetically those people. So this is not a genetic thing. This is a diet thing, in my opinion. And personally, I think that I do have. One of my grandfathers was a butcher, so definitely grew up with more beef in my diet than probably most Americans. We had beef a lot, and part of that was before meat was going bad, but when it was sitting in the counter too long and fresh meat was coming in, the family would get it a little cheaper. It just doesn't appeal because it sort of starts to brown a little bit, so it doesn't appeal in the the meat showcase. And this is back in the 70s when I was growing up as a kid, kind of thing. And so it's not like the sort of modern grocery store. And they most stores were not the pack, or they were final butchering in the stores, in most places, still in those days. So, and my grandfather owned a butcher shop that was part that was attached to a larger grocery store, but he owned the butcher part of it and ran it. It was an owner operated with maybe like one other employee at times. So just more beef in my diet than would be normal. Maybe for my economic class, more steaks per week just because of that. Because otherwise they were either highly discounted to just get them out, or they would go bad eventually. But you don't, again, just for your information, once they're cooked, you wouldn't notice the difference. And you actually they age beef. You don't slaughter the cow, when you have it. And you can slaughter the cow and eat it immediately, and cook it, eat it immediately. But properly beef that you get is aged for a while in a refrigerated type condition. Just give you guys information on that. But so yeah, it wasn't at all tasting bad. And so that might affect me being a bit taller than others, getting a little more beef, a little more protein in my diet, and not just beef as an ingredient in a in a British pie thing or something has a bit of beef in it. No, having a steak often, not like every night by any means, but having a steak a lot and having a lot more ground beef and a lot more of that kind of stuff in my diet maybe than others, including Americans growing up in my time. So, so we might all agree that South Korea going in to conquer North Korea and then going through the process of reunification, we might all cheer them on. But would we do the same if, for whatever reason, the U.S. withdraws from Asia, China, gets Taiwan, Japan is becoming isolationist, and North Korea aggressively attacks South Korea? We would be like, oh, wars of aggression are evil, blah, 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 blah. The North Koreans want to be conquered by South Korea because look at how much better the lives of South Korea are. I know at least one German who's an East German. I know several people that are East Germans. Isn't necessarily terribly happy to be part of West Germany because he sees West Germany as a decadent society. He's glad not to be in communist, and he very much said, and he was a young kid when the the wall fell at the time. I don't know if he sort of kind of maybe remembers it. I don't, but definitely from that sort of, and he talks about my nation was stolen from me or something. He's used those terms in talking with me at times. And he definitely says his parents, oh man, it was bad under East Germany. Now he just saw it as a kid, not as an adult. So his parents were very much cheerful that East Germany collapsed and becomes part of, unified Germany. But he's sort of like looking around and seeing Western decadence in Germany and wanting more order in Germany, as a German might want more order. Germans like order. They want more order. And so not necessarily, I don't know if a majority or minority they might want off of the heavy-handedness of North Korea, but they might see South Korea as decadent. They might want the economic success and the, full, we'll use the old Chinese term, full rice bowl, big meals every day. But they might not want the other aspect of it. So are wars of aggression in of themselves a war crime? I'm going to go no. No, they're not in and of themselves. We got to look at it case by case. And I think it was a mistake to charge German leadership at the Nuremberg trials for crimes of wars of aggression. Now, we could all talk about all the war crimes that happened during the war, that they were a part of either directly in that they, ordered them, participated in them, and blah, 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 or their wars that they supported facilitated these other war crimes happening. So, yeah, that's plenty good enough to whether it's execution or life imprisonment or just, 10, 20 years in prison or whatever we deem for those crimes. Plenty. So I'm not necessarily complaining about any of the government leadership. I'm talking about just generally government leadership, like somebody like Rudolf Hess, who I think he flies out and goes to Britain before the final solution starts. Now, there's already some war crimes happening, even before he goes out, and he was definitely in agreement with them. So I'm not saying Rudolf Hess is blameless, God no, or whatever, but I think just simply calling a war of aggression illegal, as far as I know, and I've seen evidence that's presented, the Russians have committed war crimes in their war with Ukraine. Okay. So, and Putin is ultimately responsible for them, whether he ordered them or not. And to the best of my knowledge, he has not just repudiated any of the crimes that have happened. He has not specifically brought people to justice. Yes, we can, again, I know I'm talking on about other things, but I guess I feel like it at the moment. There is the My Lai incident where I think it was a lieutenant or some definitely captain or below, and some, platoon or whatever of soldiers burning a village and killing a bunch of people. There was a court-martial. They went to jail. Okay, so the President of the United States is in no way responsible for the My Lai incident because our military justice system went after these criminals. Okay, so just because somebody commits a crime in your army, and we can also look at the Abu Ghraib prison. I don't know that anybody died there, but under the American situation, that was sort of famous during there. But again, those people, went to prison because of what they did in running the prison. So yeah, it's America's fault in that we had the wrong people running the prison, but we took care of it once we became well enough aware of it. So it is not the same thing as as what we're seeing with Nazi Germany, at all. So yes, you can point to, crimes that happened, and I'm sure we could probably find, whether we actually prosecuted or not, something that would, under Geneva Conventions or current law, that America would have been considered. And I don't mean necessarily dropping some bombs in Switzerland, that just, things that happen, but something that might be a war crime. And there's definitely been U.S. soldiers convicted of rape, whether they're raping some French woman or some German woman or something. There's definitely some of those things that happened, most assuredly. But sort of larger scale war crimes, we might be able to find a few that America, or some Americans, but it was never a policy, that we can see in Nazi Germany for World War II. Again, as far as I know, and I know some people, perfection in war, bullets that only kill evil people and bombs that only kill, combatant targets, and well, that didn't exist and whatever. So yeah. Okay. Now we will end this episode. Live stream will continue, and I will be checking out the chat here. So yeah, see you all then next time.